Hi recap watchers, Twisted Movies here. Today, I will explain a 2018 horror film titled Bird Box. Watch out for some spoilers, so sit back and enjoy the video. The movie opens up with a scene where a woman named Mallory is preparing her children named boy and girl on a long dangerous trip and informs the young children that they will go down a river in a rowboat. She steadily instructs them about not removing their blindfolds or she will hurt them because if they remove it, they will die. 5 years ago, Mallory, who was pregnant at the time, is visited by her sister, Jessica. A TV news report about unexplained mass suicides that are spreading across Europe and Asia. Later, they arrive at a hospital where Mallory does a prenatal checkup. After checking herself, she suddenly witnesses a woman who starts hitting her head into the window, causing everyone at the building to panic. After seeing this, she runs over to her sister's car and tells her to go immediately. While driving, they see other people crashing their cars and other pedestrians losing their minds. Jessica's phone starts ringing in the back seat of the car, and Mallory tries to help her by picking it from the seat. Right at that moment, Jessica sees something inexplicable that drives her insane and intentionally crashes her car. They both got out alive, but Mallory, who was on the ground at the time, sees her sister committing suicide by walking in front of a speeding truck. She gets up and starts running to a safer place. She falls because of other people, who are still also finding their way to a safer place. A lady then sees Mallory and invites her to a house for safety. There, the lady sees and hears a demonic invisible creature talking to her. She suddenly walks towards a burning car and enters it, thereby exploding her in front of her husband named Douglas. A passerby called Tom then sees Mallory on the ground and picks her up from the road and leads her into the house, where 6 other survivors are taking shelter. After getting into the house, Mallory tries calling her mom, but received no answers. Cheryl, who was one of the escapers, explains to them about feeling something when she was outside the streets. While others try to figure out what was happening, Tom tells them about how his crew saw the creature and killed themselves. Tom then instructs them to get all the windows closed so that they can't see outside due to the entity surrounding the area. Mallory calls again, but still receives no answers. While calling, a couple who was also in the building receives a phone call from their children, which seems like they are in trouble. After hearing them panicking, they decide to go out and help their children. One of the survivors, Charlie, says that humanity has already been judged, and the image of demons and spirits are the signs of endgame. Charlie proceeds by telling them about the spiritual beings having different names in their numerous cultures, such as Surgit, Huli Jing, and Puka. Later, it gets revealed that how Charlie actually learnt what he is saying was through the internet, because he is working on a novel. Then, Tom goes to help Mallory out. There, he tries to calm Mallory, but she refuses. Suddenly, she burst into tears and tells Tom about how she saw both her sister and Douglas's wife death in front of her. They later went to sleep at night in the building. The movie then takes us back to the present day, where Mallory and the children are still on the river, trying to reach their location. She brings out her walkie-talkie and tries to contact anybody, but receives no answers. After some time, she suddenly hears a voice calling her, but couldn't see it, due to her hiding in a blanket. Back to the past, it's already been 3 days since the events unfolded, and the radio, which was playing in their house, then announced that humans should not go outside their homes, because if they do, they will die. They receive a sudden knock on their door, which Tom later opens the door to let the survivor in. It was a pregnant lady with the name Olympia. Due to insufficient food, Greg, who was the owner of the home they are staying in, decides to volunteer on checking if it is safe to observe them indirectly through surveillance cameras, but this causes him to commit suicide right after seeing what is outside on his desktop. They were shocked after seeing Greg hitting his head into a small rock in his office room. They all got scared, and Felix, one of the survivors, tries to calm Lucy, who is a cop and survivor in the building. We are later set back to the present day, where Mallory is leading her children on the river. It's already been 14 hours they've been on the river. Suddenly, they hear a man's voice, who was pretending to help them, which his actual means were to make Mallory and her children take off their blindfolds. They later go into a fight with a man, who was trying to remove Mallory's blindfold, which she later kills him by cutting his arm with a machete. Back to 5 years earlier, Charlie tells them about getting food, but he doesn't want to go because he's too scared. He later agrees, causing Tom, Mallory, Charlie, Lucy, and Douglas to go to Charlie's work to restock their dwindling food. They drive there in a vehicle covered with black paint, so that they can't see when driving, but can use the car's GPS to navigate. They've finally got there, and Mallory gets 3 pet birds alone with her supplies. She notices the entities agitating the birds. Douglas then recommends that they should rather stay here, since they have everything they need. Later, we see Charlie's coworker attacking the group, forcing them to look at the creature. This thereby leads to Charlie sacrificing himself to save the others. They get to the house. Later at night, Felix and Lucy steal the only car the survivors have and drive away. It has already been a day on the river, and Mallory decides to take a break. She then drives the boat and hits a truck which was in the river, causing one of her children, Boy, to fall. She tries to bring him out from the water, but later realizes that the food and the blankets they have fallen off the boat. They consider stopping at a certain location so that she can search for food and other necessary supplies. She leaves the children and goes out to search for supplies. After feeling a house by touching it with her hands, she goes inside and sees it is an empty clinic. She finds supplies, but suddenly notices something was wrong. She quickly rushes to save her child, girl, who was in serious danger because of her hearing the creature, who was pretending to act as Mallory talking to her. She immediately drags her, using a rope, and quarrels with her for not staying on the boat. They later began their journey. Back in the past, she tries her walkie-talkie so that she can contact anybody outside, but later gets interrupted by Olympia, who is trying to allow a stranger inside the house. Olympia then lets the stranger named Gary into the house, which were against Douglas's wishes. Douglas tries to drive him out, but gets knocked out by Cheryl, causing them to put Douglas in the garage. Before that, Gary tells them about some people who can actually see, and they won't die, but they use that as a way to convince others to open their eyes, so that they can commit suicide. Later at night, Olympia, who earlier opened the door for a stranger, shed tears, and tells Mallory to take care of her baby if anything happens to her. By her crying, Mallory agrees, and gives her a present, which later leads them to hug. It has already been a day and 14 hours on the river. Mallory calls both boy and girl for a meeting, and tells them about the rapids. She continues by telling them one of them is going to have to look, so that the person can tell her where she should go, since she is the only adult on the boat that can direct the boat. Immediately she says it, Boy volunteers to do it, but Mallory refuses, since she knows that Boy is actually her child, and tells them she will be the one to decide who looks. We are set to the past, where both Olympia and Mallory go into labor at the same time. During that time, Gary begins drawing evil creatures he's seen before. They've both given birth. Mallory gave birth to a boy, which she later calls Boy, and Olympia gave birth to a girl, which Mallory later calls Girl. Then, Gary carries the cage that holds the 3 pet birds, and puts them in the freezer. He continues by tearing off the papers that were used to cover the windows to block the brightness coming into the house they are staying. Later, he knocks Tom unconscious, and opens the garage door, which exposes Douglas to light. Not knowing what is happening, Olympia allows him to see her baby. Within a few seconds, he rips all the window blindfolds. Everybody closes their eyes, except Olympia, who fails to look away, and witnesses the creature. She dives out the window, killing her instantly, but before killing herself, she had already given Mallory her baby. Cheryl tries to stop him, but got stopped by Gary, who makes her open her eyes, thereby causing her to stab herself in the neck with a pair of scissors. Greg then tries to take the children, which Mallory was hiding from him. Douglas escapes from the garage, and blindly attempts to kill Gary, using a shotgun. He later shoots Gary, but Gary resists, and kills him with a pair of scissors. Tom begins to recuperate shortly after, fighting Gary over the gun. After Mallory hears a few handouts fired, Tom comes over to her, and says to her that everything is fine. 5 years later, we see Boy and Girl who have all grown up, and Mallory, who is lecturing the both on how to observe their surroundings with their blindfolds on, and to sense whether something is near them. They later receive transmissions from other survivors, telling them of a safe community that is hidden in the forest, but accessible only by a boat along the river, and if they get to the rapids, they will have to take their blindfolds off, to decide where to direct to. While farming, Mallory questions Tom about Rick, who called them about a safe place. If he is some kind of a person they should trust, saying that he might be one of the infected, who can see without killing themselves. Later that day, Tom tells Boy and Girl a story about how children went outside to play back then. This annoys Mallory, and tells them to go to bed. Mallory later argues with Tom about telling them that kind of a story. Tom retaliates back, and tells her that she doesn't treat them well like how normal mothers treat their kids. Tom later goes to tell her what he sees as they leave their house. Not too long, a group of unblindfolded folks approach the place they were in, and tries to find the uninfected. They found out that there were people in the building, and tell them to come out. Tom later comes out, after telling Mallory to wait for him within 15 minutes. If he doesn't come, she will leave with the children, and go with a boat without him. He shoots almost all of them, but couldn't kill the last one, thereby making him remove his blindfolds to see clearly, and kills the last assailant. As he shoots him to death, he sees the entities, causing him to commit suicide by shooting himself. Mallory hears this and decides to pack their load on the trip to the safe community. They go blindfolded down the river on a boat, carrying the birds, so that they warm them if the creature is nearby. Right back to the decision about who will look, so that Mallory can turn to the right direction. Since she refuses to let boy do it, girl decides to do it. This makes Mallory think about her past, and later got emotional, and tells them, nobody will look. After getting on land, they start looking for a path to their destination. Within a few minutes, a voice starts talking to Mallory, thereby causing her to fall down in the forest, and leaves her children. The entity tries to convince boy and girl to remove their blindfolds, but got stopped by Mallory. They finally reach the community, which is a former school for blind people. Mallory then releases the birds, and finally gives the children names, Tom and Olympia, the people she knew while trying to survive, and later tells the both of them that she is their mother. If you liked the video, you can hit the subscribe button, and give a like to the video. If you have any thoughts for the video, let us know in the comments section below.